Sunlight cut through the attic window, carving a sharp path through the floating dust. Anton stood still, his gaze locked on the framed portrait mounted against the wood-paneled wall. The face in the frame remained unmoving, a silent observer of the room's clutter. Anton turned away, his boots scraping against the floorboards as he moved toward his desk. He cleared a space among the stacks of paper, pushing aside a pile of old receipts. He pulled 3 slips of paper from his pocket and laid them out in a precise, horizontal line. He pressed his palm down on each one to flatten the edges. The first read, patience. The second, simplicity. The third, consistency. He stared at the words, his pulse steady in the quiet room. Outside, the city hummed with a frantic, unending noise that he deliberately ignored. He was not looking for a shortcut. He was looking for a system. He picked up a pen, tapped it once against the desk, and took a slow, deep breath. The 30 days started now. By the 3rd day, the attic grew stifling. Anton sat hunched over the thick, battered copy of The Intelligent Investor. His eyes burned from hours of tracking lines of dense, technical prose. He rubbed his temples, the skin tight against his skull, and pushed the book away. The silence of the room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic, mechanical ticking of a clock on the wall. He stood up, paced the length of the attic, and stared out at the rooftops. The concepts were a tangled mess in his mind. He walked back, sat down, and forced himself to read the same paragraph for the 5th time. Slowly, the syntax shifted. The abstract numbers began to align into a coherent logic. He grabbed his notebook, the pen, scratching violently across the paper as he connected the dots. It was no longer just a collection of words. It was a strategy. He scribbled a final note, his hand moving with newfound confidence. The confusion evaporated, replaced by a sharp, sudden clarity. He understood. On day 5, the fluorescent lights of the supermarket hummed overhead. Anton walked the length of the central aisle, his eyes scanning the shelves. Bright, aggressive packaging shouted for his attention, promising convenience and prestige. He reached for a premium coffee brand, then stopped. He pulled his hand back, gripping the edge of his shopping cart until his knuckles went white. The impulse to buy was a physical itch, a reflex built over years of mindless consumption. He turned his gaze to the lower shelves, finding the plain, unbranded staples he actually needed. He placed a bag of rice and a single tin of beans into the cart. The weight of the items felt different than his usual haul of impulsive, overpriced goods. He moved to the next aisle, ignoring the flashy endcap displays that usually triggered his spending. Every item he bypassed was a conscious refusal to let status dictate his wallet. He reached the checkout line with a basket that was light, functional, and stripped of excess. He watched the cashier scan his few items, realizing that his needs were far smaller than his habits had led him to believe. He felt a sudden, sharp sense of command over his own life. By day 8, the attic felt smaller than ever. Anton pulled a large, folded map from his desk drawer and pinned it to the wall. He ran his finger from his current coordinates, tracing a long, jagged line all the way to Omaha. The distance was not just measured in miles, but in temperament. He looked out the window at the distant skyline, where the city buzzed with the frantic, high-frequency energy of the stock market. Every flashing ticker and urgent news alert felt like a physical vibration against the glass. He reached out and pushed the window shut, muffling the sound of the street until the room was tomb quiet. This was the secret. To see the market clearly, he had to be nowhere near it. He took a pen and marked a clean circle around Omaha, then drew a hard line through the center of his own location. The chaos of the world stayed outside, locked behind the glass. Inside, his pulse slowed to a rhythmic, steady beat. He finally felt the weight of the market drop away, leaving behind a cold, crystalline focus. He was no longer reacting to the noise. He was finally listening to the silence. By day 12, the attic floor was a workshop of strange geometry. Anton arranged hundreds of coins into a steep, narrow ramp. He pressed a small ball of snow together, his fingers reddening in the cold draft of the attic. He placed it at the peak and gave it a gentle nudge. It rolled, picking up loose change as it descended, growing steadily thicker. Then, the ball hit a slight unevenness in the metal surface and wobbled. A chunk of snow sheared off, skittering across the floor. Anton lunged, catching the main body before it could disintegrate. He held it, his breath hitching in his chest. He realized then that the snowball was not a guarantee. It was a constant demand for attention. One lapse in focus, one tremor in his hand, and the entire mass would collapse back into nothing. He carefully patched the side, his movements deliberate and slow. He watched the ball sit there, fragile yet heavy with potential. He understood now that time was not just a resource. It was a weight he had to carry every single day. The discipline he sought was not a destination, but a relentless, daily act of preservation. Day 15 arrived with a sharp, insistent glow from the corner of the room. Anton had left his monitor on, and the screen was now pulsing with a rhythmic, neon-red banner. Hype stocks. The text flickered, casting long, jittery shadows against the attic walls. It was a siren call of easy gains and rapid movement. Anton sat at his desk, his fingers hovering over the keyboard, the temptation to click vibrating through his arm. His pulse quickened in sync with the flashing light. This was the noise he had vowed to ignore. He watched the numbers climb on the screen, a digital mirage, promising wealth without work. He felt his resolve fraying, the old habits of impulse clawing at his mind. He took a long, steadying breath, closed his eyes, and reached behind the desk. His hand found the thick, rubberized cord. With a single, sharp jerk, he pulled the plug from the wall. The neon light vanished instantly. The hum of the cooling fan died away. Silence flooded the room, heavy and absolute. Anton exhaled, his heart rate dropping back to a manageable pace. He picked up his pen, opened his notebook, and wrote a single line: "Understand before you act." Day 18 dawned with a new precision. Anton laid out his notebook, mapping the hours into rigid blocks. Reading, work, learning, reflection, and time for family. Each block had a clear start and end point. He set a kitchen timer, the mechanical tick serving as a metronome for his day. By mid-morning, the familiar urge to switch tasks or check for distractions flared. He felt his leg bounce, his eyes darting toward the window, the old restlessness trying to reclaim his focus. He forced his hand to the page and logged his progress, the scratch of the pen grounding him. He finished the block exactly when the timer dinged. He stood, stretched his spine, and moved immediately into the next task without hesitation. The frantic, blurred edges of his old life were gone, replaced by a steady, rhythmic cadence. He was no longer drifting through his day. He was driving it. Every action felt intentional, fueled by the structure he had built. He looked at his watch, confirmed the time, and turned back to his desk. The chaos had been dismantled, replaced by a quiet, unbreakable discipline that defined his new reality. By day 22, the attic felt different. Anton looked at his savings account balance, a series of digits that once represented safety, now appearing as mere potential. He had spent weeks building his own discipline, but something remained stagnant. He walked to the corner of the room, picking up a sturdy wooden box he had marked with a bold, hand-drawn label, "Community." He held his cash in his hands, feeling the weight of the paper. For a second, he paused, the old instinct to hoard and protect his resources fighting the new, broader perspective he had been cultivating. He looked at his notes on the desk, the words, "patience and integrity," staring back at him. He realized that true mastery was not just in how one grows, but in how one shares. He pushed the money through the slot. The sound of the bills hitting the bottom of the box was final. A clean, dry thud that resonated in the quiet room. He felt a sudden, sharp clarity. His success was no longer a closed loop. By investing in his surroundings, he was expanding his reach, redefining his purpose from simple accumulation to meaningful impact. He closed the lid, his hands steady, and felt a profound shift in his own definition of what it meant to thrive. By day 27, the attic had become a sanctuary of silence. Anton sat in his chair, the steam from a ceramic cup of tea rising in a thin, steady line. He looked at his phone, resting on the desk. It was a source of constant, frantic updates, a tether to the market's endless noise. He picked it up, feeling the cold weight of the metal, and walked to the bottom drawer. He placed the device inside, shoved the drawer shut, and turned the key. The absence of the screen's glow was immediate. He sat back down and took a long, slow sip of the tea. The heat warmed his throat. He closed his eyes and focused on the rhythmic pattern of his own breath. For the first time in his life, the silence did not feel empty. It felt full. He checked his wrist, feeling for his pulse. It was slow, steady, and entirely his own. The anxiety that usually hummed in his chest like a live wire had simply faded away. Outside the attic window, the world continued its frantic pace, but in here, nothing moved unless he willed it. The stillness was not a lack of activity. It was the absence of interference. He was finally, completely, present. On day 30, the first light of dawn crawled across the attic floorboards. Anton stood by the window, watching the horizon turn from charcoal to a soft, persistent gold. He walked to his desk and picked up the 3 pieces of paper he had placed there a month ago. They were soft at the edges now, the ink slightly faded from constant handling. Patience, knowledge, integrity. He traced the letters with his thumb. He checked his bank balance. The numbers were not millions, and he had not conquered the market. Yet, as he looked at his own reflection in the window, he saw a change that no ledger could capture. His eyes were clear, his posture was steady, and the frantic urge to chase the next trend had vanished. He realized the 30 days were not a finish line, but a beginning. He had stripped away the noise and found the core of how a titan builds a life. He folded the notes carefully, placed them in his pocket, and turned away from the window. The room was bright now. He walked toward the stairs, his step measured and intentional. He was not yet where he was going, but for the first time, he knew exactly how to get there.